Hello, my name is Jesse Parker. Today I would like to take you through a video essay on the topic of critical pedagogy as how Paulo Friere used it. First, allow me to give an itinerary of how I will go about discussing and critiquing critical pedagogy. I will go over what pedagogy means and how it is a foundation that must be laid before we can talk about critical pedagogy. Then, I will move on to discuss Paulo Friere by briefly touching upon who he is and how he has contributed to critical pedagogy. I will then discuss his specific brand of critical pedagogy, explaining what it is and how it would have been used. I will go over the pros and cons of the theory and analyze how relevant it would be in today's society. Lastly, I will finish with my interpretation of how feasible the theory is and whether it is useful to us in the current era of education. First and foremost, we must understand what pedagogy is. Pedagogy is a term that originates in ancient Greece. It stems from the Greek word pedagogos, which refers to slaves who led students to school and back while teaching them various things. The word is made of two root words, pedos, meaning boy or child, and agogos, meaning leader. These days, it has a slightly different meaning, being the art, science, or profession of teaching as described by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Pedagogy is often used to describe the methods or style in which one teaches, with the express aim of the teacher being the education of a student. This involves changing or modifying their current knowledge or skill in a subject through various methods. The process of this is considered the basis for the numerous theories and ideas about learning in which critical pedagogy stems from. Next, I would like to talk about Paulo Friere, as he is commonly considered to be one of the most influential philosophers in the field of education. To understand his educational philosophy, we need to look at his background briefly. He was born in Recife, Brazil in 1921 to a Catholic middle-class family. When he was only 9 or so, his father passed during the hard times of the dirty 30s, and as a direct result, he and his family experienced poverty. Due to the harshness of the times, he was forced to steal food so that he and his family could survive. He ended up having to drop out of elementary school to work and help his family as best he could. He did eventually go back to school, in which he graduated high school, then went to and studied at Recife's School of Law. It is important to note that his experiences in his younger years held a huge amount of influence on his ideas later on in his life, as it granted him an unwavering desire to help and educate those stuck in poverty. This led to him starting a campaign to teach literacy to the common people in Brazil. He started in 1947, and by the 1960s, he had started a movement that focused on reducing illiteracy in the country. One potential reason illiteracy was such a problem that Paulo wanted to solve was due to illiterate people not being allowed to vote in Brazil at the time. During this time, he taught many people and gained many experiences as a teacher, which led to his eventual theory of critical pedagogy and a term he called conscientização. This term refers to how an individual can move from having little to no understanding of his own consciousness or the world to being able to understand all the nuances involved in being aware of where you stand in the world. All other forms of critical pedagogy can be attributed in some way to Paulo and his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. In said book and others he authored, he goes about describing how one can educate adults out of poverty by way of dialogue through asking questions to increase their awareness of society. Although Paulo Friere was the father of critical pedagogy, his ideas behind the theory are different compared to more contemporary theories stemming from critical pedagogy. The current view of critical pedagogy is one in which issues of social justice and politics should not be considered different from teaching and learning. Paulo Friere's idea of the theory only has semblances to that, as he did strive to bring about the recognition of authoritarian governments in those he taught. However, he focused on trying to engage his students in thought-provoking questions that examined many social issues the common workers dealt with on a daily basis in order to foster a desire for action. His view highlighted the importance of critical thinking in any situation. In order to do this, Paulo took a different view to the teacher-student dynamic. Most commonly in that time, and even to some degree today, the relationship between teacher and student was thought to be a vertical one, in which teachers were of a higher position and power than the students. This view was known as the banking method, in which the teacher simply deposited information into the student. It relied on the control of the teacher and keeping the student subservient. His view, however, flipped that dynamic on its side, having the student and teacher both be open to learning from each other. He thought that as a teacher we should be constantly learning as well as the students, and that the different perspectives of the students could influence the teacher as much as the teacher could influence the student. With this horizontal relationship between teacher and student, Paulo facilitated the use of dialogue and asking questions. He focused on trying to create questions for any topic in the classroom, which critical pedagogy was thus born from. Due to this constant questioning for answers, Paulo's critical pedagogy allowed for the development of critical thinking and conscientização in his students. In this way, it differentiated itself from the typical banking method, as Paulo suggested that teachers should be problematizing any issue being discussed in order to create true critical thinking skills, as often the teachers would not have the immediate answer for the students. As an aside, to problematize is to consider something in the form of a problem that needs solving, or to propose a problem. Without these immediate answers, the students would be forced to come up with answers of their own. This is the brand of critical pedagogy as originally intended by Paulo Friere. Now that we have a brief understanding of just what Paulo's idea of critical pedagogy is, I would like to now go over the pros and cons of the theory. First, let's start with the pros. Number 1. It facilitates critical thinking. This can be clearly seen in how the method, when used properly, almost forces the students and teacher to talk to each other and discuss in depth any given topic as if it was a problem. Number 2. It allows the students and the teacher to be open to new perspectives and points of view. This occurs when the idea that the teacher and student is equal in terms of authority. Number 3. It facilitates interactive learning with the students that could lead to better retention of information. This would be due to how memorable discussions are compared to raw memorization. Number 4. It can be used to highlight social problems within society. This was especially useful during Paulo Friere's time, as there was a large divide between the working class people and those who held power in Brazil. Next, let's look at some of the cons to the theory. Number 1. It can cause standstills in education. If a problem cannot be agreed upon in the class and the teacher has no answer, the students will likely be hung up on solving it and thusly not move on to potentially more important matters. Number 2. It could lead to problematizing things that should not be problematized. This point is debatable, however it should still be noted that the problematization of proven facts in history or the sciences would only hinder the students' understanding if they come to the conclusion that some absolute truths are not facts. Number 3. It does not address how to deal with problem students. Would this style of teaching not allow students who enjoy derailing the classroom ample opportunities to do so? Considering there are no defined rules and everyone is considered equal, there is no agreed upon way to behave. Critical pedagogy is a theory which is heavily debated even to the modern day. There are many people who agree with its use regardless of time or place, while there are also others who hold to the exact opposite view. When I look at critical pedagogy, I can see its usefulness in the current day, but I can also see the flaws that would hold it back as well. I think that it is a theory that is extremely nuanced, as it holds a contextual reason as to why it originally was created, and this reason for its creation also applies to how useful it can be in today's day and age. It is important for us to see that Paulo created his theory and method as a direct response to what he had grown up with and personally experienced. It was his time in high school and university that allowed him to experience the banking method of teaching, in which he directly responded to with the horizontal relationship dynamic that is in critical pedagogy. It was his response to the poverty he grew up in and saw around him. It was his response to the disparity he saw between the poor working class who could not vote at the time as they were illiterate. It was his response to the authoritarian-like divide between the rich people and the working class. In other words, critical pedagogy was created to combat a specific cultural and social problem in Brazil. It worked very well at this, and Paulo Freire should be and is held in high regard for combating these social issues in his country. That being said, the theory may not hold up as well in other countries that do not hold the same problems as Brazil did. In Canada right now, there is not as much a need for social and political change to the same degree as was in Brazil. A vast majority of Canadians can read, and anyone who is 18 and older who is a citizen can vote. What I'm trying to get at is that the situation which called for critical pedagogy in Brazil is not currently in Canada. We do not have social and political problems to the scale they were in Brazil during Paulo's time. It is also important to note the difference in how students behave and view themselves in the current time. Though most students want to learn, there are those who enjoy causing disruptions in the class. Critical pedagogy does not offer any level of order to the classroom, nor structure. This allows for disruptive students to easily derail classroom discussions, and does not give any curriculum or guide for teachers to follow when steering the discussions. I also think that having some semblance of authority in the classroom is necessary to be able to move or engage such disruptive students into wanting to learn through talking with that student in a professional and loving way. However, there are still key aspects that should be taken from critical pedagogy and incorporated into education here. Though I don't think that problematizing every single subject is a good idea, it can definitely add a level of depth to the student's learning as well as incorporate critical thinking. It allows for classes to be memorable, and it allows the student to relate the information they need to learn to an event in time, leading to better memory retention. I think that we should incorporate part of the theory within modern education's knack for the curriculum. I imagine a good example of what that would look like would be the methods of John Dewey, as his methods had both critical pedagogy in the form of the many questions used to facilitate critical thinking in his students, but also order, in that he held a curriculum too. To conclude, I think that critical pedagogy, as Paulo Freire created it, is not necessary to its entirety in today's age. It was a key instrument in allowing the people of Brazil to better themselves, and in that context, is a fantastic tool. However, in today's schools, I think a mixture of Paulo's critical pedagogy and the regular curriculum that we have would be the best method for teaching, as it allows both critical thinking and order in the classroom. Thank you for listening to my project/presentation on Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy and my interpretation of its usefulness in today's society. Please feel free to let me know what you think of my presentation/project, and if you have anything you disagree with, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much.